The autumn rain hammered against the windows of 42 Willow Street, like forgotten promises trying to find their way home. Sophie Matthews stood in the kitchen, her fingers wrapped around a mug of tea that had long gone cold, watching the droplets race down the glass. At 15, she had her mother's auburn hair, but her father's green eyes, eyes that now stared at a ghost from the past, standing on their doorstep. David Matthews looked smaller than she remembered. 8 years had carved lines into his face that weren't there when he'd kissed her goodbye that October morning, promising to bring back her favorite chocolate from the shops. He never came back, until now. "Sophie?" His voice cracked, barely audible over the rain. "My God, you've grown so much." She didn't move from the doorway. Behind her, she could hear Jamie's rhythmic rocking in his chair, the familiar sound that had become the heartbeat of their home. Her little brother was having one of his difficult days, and Mum wouldn't be back from her double shift at the hospital until morning. "Mum's not here," Sophie said, her voice steady as granite. She'd practiced this moment 1,000 times in her mind, but nothing had prepared her for how ordinary he looked. She'd expected a monster or a hero, not this weathered man in a faded coat with shoes that had seen too many miles. I came to see you both, to explain." "It's been 8 years, Dad." The word felt foreign on her tongue, like speaking a language she'd once known but had deliberately forgotten. 8 years, 3 months, and 16 days. David's shoulders sagged. "You counted." Someone had to. From inside, Jamie's humming grew louder. The opening bars of "You Are My Sunshine," the only song that could calm him during his episodes. Sophie's hand instinctively moved toward the door, torn between the brother who needed her and the father who'd forfeited that right. "Can I come in, just for a moment?" David's eyes darted to the neighbors' windows, where curtains twitched with curiosity. Mrs. O'Brien would have a field day with this. Sophie stepped aside, not out of welcome, but out of practicality. The last thing they needed was to become tomorrow's gossip at the local Tesco. David entered the home he'd abandoned, his eyes taking in the changes. The new wallpaper Claire had put up herself, the photographs where his face had been carefully removed, the toys scattered across the living room floor that belonged to a child he didn't know existed. "Whose?" He gestured to a colorful sensory mat spread across the floor, weighted blankets folded neatly beside it. Sophie watched him carefully, noting how his hands trembled slightly, how his clothes hung loose on his frame. Whatever life he'd been living hadn't been kind to him. Good, a part of her thought, before immediately feeling guilty for it. "You should sit," she said, not answering his question. "But you can't stay long." As David lowered himself onto the sofa, the same one where he used to read her bedtime stories, Sophie heard Jamie's humming stop. Her brother appeared in the doorway, 7 years old, with Claire's dark hair and David's same green eyes, holding his favorite blue elephant. "Sophie." Jamie's voice was small, uncertain. He didn't like strangers. David's intake of breath was sharp enough to cut glass. His eyes moved from Jamie to Sophie, understanding dawning like a terrible sunrise. "This is Jamie," Sophie said simply, moving to her brother's side, her hand gentle on his shoulder. "He doesn't like loud noises or sudden movements. He likes trains, the color blue, and when I read him stories about dragons, he can count to 1,000 and knows every bus route in Manchester. He's mine." David's voice was barely a whisper. "No," Sophie said quietly but firmly, pulling Jamie closer. "He's ours, Mum's and mine. You're just someone who shares his DNA." Jamie pressed against Sophie's side, his fingers finding hers in their secret handshake. 3 squeezes that meant, "I love you," 4 that meant, "I need help," 5 that meant, "I'm scared." He squeezed 4 times. "It's okay, little man," Sophie murmured, guiding him back to his room. "Go finish your puzzle. I'll be there in 5 minutes to help with the corner pieces." When she returned, David had his head in his hands, shoulders shaking. The man who'd walked away from 1 child had just discovered he'd abandoned 2. "Mum found out she was pregnant 2 weeks after you left," Sophie said, sitting across from him, her back straight as a soldier's. "The stress nearly killed her, literally. Preeclampsia at 28 weeks. Jamie was born at 31 weeks, spent 2 months in the NICU. Mum sold her mother's ring to pay for the parking at the hospital. Each word was deliberate, measured. She'd written them in her journal, the leather-bound book hidden beneath her bed, where she'd documented everything, every school play performed to an empty seat, every Father's Day card never sent, every night she'd held her mother while she cried herself to sleep. "Sophie, I'm not finished." David fell silent and Sophie continued, her voice carrying the weight of years compressed into moments. When Jamie was diagnosed with autism at 3, Mum worked nights so she could take him to therapy during the day. I learned to cook because someone had to feed us when she was sleeping. I was 9 years old, standing on a chair to reach the stove, burning myself more times than I can count because YouTube tutorials don't teach you how to flip pancakes when your hands are too small for the pan. The rain outside had softened to a drizzle, but inside the small living room, a storm was building. Sophie could see her father trying to process it all, the boy he never knew existed, the daughter who'd become someone he didn't recognize, the life that had continued in his absence like a river flowing around a removed stone. "Mr. Patel from the corner shop taught me to ride the bike you promised to teach me on," she continued, her fingers tracing the edge of an old scar on her palm, a souvenir from her first attempt at cooking Sunday roast. "Mrs. O'Brien next door watched Jamie when Mum had to work and I had exams. Father Timothy from St. Mary's came to my school concerts, sitting in the seat we kept empty for you out of foolish hope." David looked up then, his eyes red-rimmed. "I sent money twice. You sent money twice in 8 years, £50 each time. Mum used it to buy Jamie's weighted blanket and my school shoes. We framed the envelope from the second one, not out of gratitude, but as a reminder that we survived without it." From Jamie's room came the sound of puzzle pieces clicking together, punctuated by his happy hums when he found the right fit. It was a sound that had become Sophie's favorite music, the soundtrack of a childhood spent being both sister and second parent. "Why did you come back?" Sophie asked, genuinely curious. "After all this time, why now?" David's hands fumbled in his pocket, pulling out a crumpled newspaper clipping. Sophie recognized it immediately. Her photo from the Manchester Evening News, the article about her winning the regional science fair with a project on autism therapy techniques. "Young genius develops innovative approach to sensory processing. I saw this 3 months ago in a shop in Birmingham. My daughter in the newspaper. Brilliant, accomplished, everything I never was." He tried to smooth the clipping, his fingers shaking. "I've been in recovery, gambling addiction, lost everything, job, flat, friends, been staying at a shelter, working construction when I can get it. But seeing this, I realized I'd lost the only thing that ever really mattered." Sophie studied him, this stranger who wore her father's face. She could see the telltale signs now, the hollow cheeks of someone who'd chosen their addiction over food too many times, the nervous tick in his left hand that probably craved a betting slip, the way his eyes kept darting to the window like he was calculating escape routes. "You want forgiveness," she said. It wasn't a question. "I want a chance." Those aren't the same thing. The front door opened then, keys jangling in the lock. Claire Matthews entered, still in her nurse's scrubs, exhaustion written in every line of her body, until she saw David. The umbrella fell from her hand, clattering on the hardwood floor. "Get out!" Her voice was ice and iron. 8 years of single motherhood forged into 2 words. "Claire, get out!" But Sophie stood, surprising them both. "No, Mum, not yet." Claire's eyes snapped to her daughter, confusion mixing with protective fury. "Sophie, you don't have to. I know I don't have to, but I need to. I have something to say, and he needs to hear it. After that, if you want him gone, he goes." Mother and daughter locked eyes, years of silent communication passing between them. Claire had taught Sophie to be strong, but Sophie had taught Claire that strength sometimes meant facing the very things you wanted to run from. "5 minutes," Claire said, moving to stand beside her daughter, their shoulders touching in solidarity. Sophie walked to the bookshelf, pulling out a worn leather journal. Its pages were swollen with 8 years of memories pressed between them. Ticket stubs from school plays, dried flowers from Mother's Day bouquets Jamie had made at his special school, photographs, report cards, hospital bracelets. "This is what you missed," Sophie said, placing it on the coffee table between them. Every doctor's appointment when Jamie wouldn't stop screaming, and Mum had to hold him for hours. Every night I sang him to sleep because he was afraid of the dark, and there was no dad to check for monsters. Every morning, Mum put on makeup to hide the circles under her eyes before walking into the hospital to save other people's lives while hers was falling apart. She opened the journal to a page near the middle. June 15th, 2019. Jamie's first word wasn't mama or dada, it was Sophie. Because I was the one who sat with him through endless speech therapy videos when we couldn't afford more sessions. Claire's hand found Sophie's shoulder, squeezing gently. Their own secret language that meant, "I'm proud of you," and "I'm here," all at once. David stared at the journal like it was a religious artifact, something holy and terrible that held the weight of his sins. "But here's what that journal doesn't show," Sophie continued, her voice gaining strength. "It doesn't show that we're okay. Better than okay. We're a family. Incomplete maybe, unconventional definitely, but unbreakable absolutely." Jamie appeared again, this time carrying his completed puzzle, a 1,000-piece image of the solar system. He'd been working on it for weeks, his methodical mind finding peace in creating order from chaos. "Finished!" he announced proudly, then noticed the stranger again. His body tensed, fingers flapping in the way they did when he was anxious. "Jamie, this is..." Sophie paused, looking at David. "This is someone Mum used to know. He's just visiting." "Visiting means leaving soon," Jamie said matter-of-factly, the way he processed the world in absolutes. "I don't like visitors who make Sophie sad." The innocence of the observation cut deeper than any accusation could. David's face crumpled as he watched his son, this beautiful, complex child he'd never known, stand protective of the sister who'd raised him. "You're right, Jamie," David managed. "I should go." "Wait!" Sophie's voice was firm. "I'm not finished. Sit down." Something in her tone made both adults obey. This wasn't the 7-year-old girl David had left behind. This was someone forged in the furnace of premature responsibility, someone who'd learned that childhood was a luxury not everyone could afford. "You want to know what your daughter has to tell you? The message you didn't expect?" Sophie moved to stand between her mother and brother, the apex of their small triangle of survival. "It's this: we forgive you." The words hung in the air, like suspended rain. Claire's sharp intake of breath matched David's stunned silence. "Not for your sake," Sophie clarified quickly. "For ours. We forgive you because carrying hate is heavy, and we've carried enough. We forgive you because Jamie deserves to grow up in a home where love is stronger than resentment. We forgive you because Mum taught me that forgiveness is not about the person who hurt you. It's about freeing yourself from the prison they put you in." She paused, watching David's face cycle through relief, hope, and then confusion as she continued. "But forgiveness isn't a key to our door. It's not an invitation to Sunday dinners or school plays or birthdays. It's simply us choosing to let go of the anchor you tied to our feet when you left." Claire was crying now, silent tears that she didn't bother to wipe away. 8 years of suppressed emotion finally finding release in her daughter's words. "The message you didn't expect," Sophie said, her voice softening but remaining resolute, "is that your leaving was the best thing that ever happened to us. Not because life was easier, God knows it wasn't, but because it taught us who we really are. Mum discovered she's stronger than steel. I learned I can be both a child and a caretaker. And Jamie got to grow up in a home where different doesn't mean less than, where his autism isn't a burden, but just another part of our beautiful, complicated normal." She picked up the journal again, this time flipping to the last entry, dated just the week before. "I wrote this before I knew you were coming back. Want to know what it says?" David nodded, unable to speak. "Today, Jamie hugged me without being prompted. Mum got promoted towards sister. I got into Cambridge's summer program for gifted students. We celebrated with fish and chips from Murphy's and watched Jamie's favorite train documentary for the 100th time. Dad crossed my mind today, and for the first time I felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness, not longing. Nothing. We are complete as we are. We are enough. The silence that followed was heavy, but not uncomfortable. It was the silence of truth settling into its proper place, of reality asserting itself over fantasy. "So what happens now?" David asked, his voice small, defeated. "Now you leave," Sophie said simply. "You go back to your recovery, your new life, whatever that looks like. You work on becoming the person you should have been 8 years ago, not for us, but for yourself. And maybe someday when Jamie's older, when he can understand and decide for himself, maybe then we can have a different conversation. But not now. Not yet. What about you?" David looked at Sophie desperately. "Don't you want to know me? Your father?" Sophie considered this, her head tilting in a gesture painfully reminiscent of how she used to look at him when she was small, trying to understand something beyond her grasp. "I did know you. You were the man who read me the Gruffalo with different voices, who taught me to tie my shoes with bunny ears, who promised to always be there." She shook her head slowly. "That man died 8 years ago. You're just someone who looks like him." David stood to leave, his movements mechanical, aged beyond his years. But as he reached the door, Sophie called out one more time, "Dad!" The word made him freeze. "I need you to know something else. The gambling, Mum knew. She knew before you left." The revelation hit like a physical blow. David turned, his face ashen. "What?" Claire spoke for the first time since demanding he leave. "The betting slips in your jacket pockets, the ATM withdrawals, the lies about overtime that never showed in your paycheck. I knew, David. I was planning an intervention, had contacted a treatment center, but you ran before I could try to help you. Why didn't you? Why didn't you tell me you knew? Because you didn't want help. You wanted escape. And nothing I could have said would have stopped someone who'd already decided to leave." Claire's voice was steady, matter of fact. She'd processed this truth years ago. Jamie had wandered back to his puzzle, carefully dismantling it to start again tomorrow, his ritual that brought order to his world. His humming resumed, a gentle backdrop to the adult drama he didn't understand, but sensed was important. "There's one more thing," Sophie said, reaching into her school bag. She pulled out an envelope, pristine white against her trembling hand. "This came last month. I haven't shown Mum yet." She handed it to David, who read it with growing amazement. Cambridge University, full scholarship, youngest participant ever selected for the medical preparation program. "I'm going to be a doctor," Sophie said quietly. "Pediatric neurology, specializing in autism spectrum disorders. I want to help families like ours, but with fewer struggles." David looked at this remarkable young woman his daughter had become, seeing Claire's determination and something else, something that might have been his if he'd stayed to nurture it. "The irony," Sophie continued, "is that I might never have discovered my calling if you'd stayed. I wouldn't have spent nights researching Jamie's condition, wouldn't have learned to advocate for him at school, wouldn't have developed my therapy techniques. Your absence shaped my purpose." Mrs. O'Brien's face appeared briefly in the window next door, her perpetual neighborhood watch in full effect. Tomorrow, everyone would know David Matthews had returned and been sent away again. But tonight, it was just them, a broken family finding beauty in their fragments. "I should hate you," Sophie said, her voice wondering. "For years I did. I wrote you letters full of rage that I burned in the garden. I imagined confronting you, making you feel every ounce of pain you caused us. But somewhere along the way, the hate just evaporated, like morning mist when the sun comes up." She moved to the mantelpiece, where family photos told the story of 8 years without him. "See this one? Jamie's first day at his special school. He was terrified, but he went because I promised to wait outside all day. And I did. 6 hours sitting on a bench, just so he could see me through the window. This one? Mum's graduation from her advanced nursing program. She studied at the kitchen table after double shifts, falling asleep over textbooks. I'd cover her with a blanket and finish making Jamie's lunch for school. And this, my favorite, last Christmas. Jamie managed the shopping center for the first time without a meltdown. We celebrated with hot chocolate, and he smiled, really smiled. That's when I knew we'd made it. Each photo was a testament to survival, to the family that had grown stronger in the spaces where David should have been. You know what Jamie said last week? Sophie asked, not waiting for an answer. He asked why some children have dads and he doesn't. I told him that families come in all shapes, that ours is just a different shape than others. He thought about it, then said, "Our shape is a triangle. Triangles are the strongest shape in engineering." He's 7 years old and already understands what took me years to learn. David was openly weeping now, the kind of tears that come from recognizing losses that can never be recovered. "I'm so sorry, God, I'm so sorry." "I know," Sophie said simply, "but sorry doesn't change anything. It doesn't give Jamie a father to teach him to shave when he's older. It doesn't give me back the dad who was supposed to scare away boys and walk me down the aisle someday. It doesn't give Mum back the partner she deserved." Claire moved then, crossing to her daughter, pulling her into an embrace that spoke of pride too vast for words. Sophie, who'd been strong for so long, finally allowed herself a moment of vulnerability, her shoulders shaking slightly. "We need you to leave now," Claire said to David, her voice gentle but final. "Not out of cruelty, but out of kindness. Every minute you stay makes it harder, for all of us." David nodded, understanding that this was its own form of mercy. He moved toward the door, then paused. "The message, Sophie's message. Can I take it with me? To remember?" Sophie considered this, then shook her head. "No, but I'll tell you one more time, so listen carefully. We forgive you, but we don't need you. We release you from the guilt, but not from the consequences. We wish you well, but from a distance." That's the message, Dad. That's all of it. As David reached for the door handle, Jamie suddenly spoke, his voice cutting through the emotion with the clarity that only children possess. "The man is sad, Sophie. His colors are all wrong." Jamie had synesthesia, a neurological trait that came with his autism, allowing him to see emotions as colors. It was one of his superpowers, as Sophie called them, turning his different wiring into something magical rather than problematic. "What colors do you see, little man?" Sophie asked softly. "Gray like rain clouds, brown like dead leaves, but there's a tiny bit of yellow trying to get out, like a sun behind storm." Jamie tilted his head, studying David with innocent intensity. "He needs to let the yellow grow." David stood frozen, destroyed by the profound simplicity of his son's observation. This child he'd never known had seen straight through to his soul in a way no adult could. "Jamie's right," Sophie said, her voice taking on the protective tone she used when translating Jamie's world to others. "You do need to let the yellow grow. But you need to do it somewhere else, as someone else, for someone else, not for us. Can I write letters? Not to expect answers, just to let you know I'm trying." David's question hung fragile in the air. Claire and Sophie exchanged glances, another silent conversation in their language of survival. "Once a year," Sophie decided, "on Jamie's birthday, January 15th, you can send a letter to Mum's work. We'll decide whether to read it. No return address, no expectations, no attempts to visit. Just proof of life, proof of effort. That's all." David nodded, grasping this thread of connection like a lifeline, even though he knew it was more than he deserved. As he finally opened the door, Manchester's perpetual drizzle had stopped, leaving the air clean and sharp. The streetlights reflected in puddles, creating mirrors of light in the darkness. Mrs. O'Brien's curtains twitched again, but Sophie didn't care. Let the neighborhood talk. They'd survived worse than gossip. "Sophie?" David turned one last time. "What you've become, who you are, it's extraordinary. I can't take credit for any of it, but I need you to know I'm proud. Devastatingly proud." "I know," Sophie replied, "but I'm not extraordinary." I'm just a girl who learned to be enough when half of her whole went missing. Thousands of kids do it every day. We're not special. We're just survivors." With that, David Matthews walked back into the night he'd emerged from, his figure growing smaller until he was just another stranger on a Manchester street. Inside, the Matthews family, the real one, the one forged in absence and strengthened by struggle, stood together. "Mum needs tea," Jamie announced, his intuition sharp as always. "With the special biscuits from the high shelf. Sophie needs hot chocolate with exactly 3 marshmallows. Jamie needs apple juice in the dinosaur cup." It was his way of processing, of returning to routine when the world felt too big. Sophie ruffled his hair, careful not to disturb him too much. He didn't like unexpected touch. "You're absolutely right, little man. Let's get Mum tea." As they moved to the kitchen, Claire caught Sophie's arm. "How did you become so wise? When did my little girl become this person? The same day you became both parents instead of one. The same day we all became more than we thought possible." Sophie smiled, sad but genuine. "Besides, someone had to be the grown-up when you were at work. Might as well have been the one who could reach the top shelf by standing on the counter." They prepared their drinks in comfortable silence, the rhythm of family life resuming like a song returning to its chorus. Jamie arranged the biscuits in perfect symmetry on the plate, his need for order bringing its own kind of beauty to their evening. "Will he come back?" Jamie asked suddenly. "The sad man with wrong colors." "No, sweetheart," Claire said, pulling him into the kind of gentle hug he could tolerate. "He won't come back." "Good," Jamie said simply. "We don't have room. Our triangle is perfect." Sophie caught her mother's eye over Jamie's head, both of them marveling at the profound wisdom wrapped in his unique perspective. He was right, of course. Their triangle was perfect, not because it was without flaws, but because it was complete in itself. As they settled into the living room, Jamie between them on the sofa, Sophie pulled out her acceptance letter from Cambridge again. "I haven't answered yet. The program starts in summer, but it means being away for 6 weeks." "You're going," Claire said immediately. "No discussion." "But Jamie will miss you terribly and count the days until you return. He'll make a calendar and cross off each day with a different colored marker. We'll video call every night, and you'll read him his bedtime story through the screen. We'll manage, Sophie. We always do." Jamie looked up from his juice. "Sophie's going to be a doctor for children like me?" "Yes, little man, for children exactly like you." "Then she has to go." "It's her yellow trying to get out." He said it with the certainty he usually reserved for train schedules and dinosaur facts. Sophie pulled him close. This brother who'd been her anchor and her purpose, her challenge and her greatest teacher. "When did you get so smart?" "Tuesdays," Jamie replied seriously. "I get smart on Tuesdays. Today is Tuesday." They laughed, real, genuine laughter that filled the spaces where sadness had lived for too long. It was the sound of healing, of choosing joy despite everything, of a family that had learned to dance in the rain rather than wait for the storm to pass. Later, after Jamie was asleep, his nightlight casting star patterns on his ceiling, Sophie and Claire sat at the kitchen table, the same one where homework was done, bills were paid, and dreams were both buried and born. "I need to ask you something," Sophie said, wrapping her hands around her mug. "Do you regret it? Any of it?" Claire considered this, her eyes traveling to the wall where they'd measured the children's height over the years. Sophie's marks steady and consistent, Jamie's appearing only after David left. "I regret that you had to grow up so fast. I regret that Jamie won't know what it's like to have a father teach him things I can't. I regret the nights you heard me crying when I thought you were asleep." "But," Sophie prompted, "but I don't regret the strength we found. I don't regret the way you and Jamie bonded. I don't regret the community we built, the friends who became family, and I definitely don't regret the people we've become." Sophie nodded, understanding flowing between them. "The message I gave him, was it too harsh?" "No, love, it was perfect. You gave him what he needed, freedom from guilt, while protecting what we've built. That takes a wisdom most adults never achieve. I learned from the best. Sophie said, squeezing her mother's hand. They sat in comfortable silence, the kind that only comes from years of shared struggle and triumph. Outside, Manchester continued its eternal rhythm, buses rumbling past, neighbors returning home, the city breathing its industrial lullaby. "Mum?" Sophie asked. "What would have happened if he'd stayed? If he'd gotten help? Been a proper father?" Claire's smile was wistful. "We'll never know, but I like to think that's not the point. The point is what we did with what we had. And what we did, Sophie, was extraordinary." The next morning came grey and ordinary, Manchester wearing its usual uniform of clouds and possibility. Sophie walked Jamie to his school, their hands linked, his fingers tapping out the pattern of prime numbers against her palm. His way of staying calm in the chaos of morning traffic. "Sophie?" Jamie asked as they waited at the crossing. "Are you sad about the man?" She considered lying, providing the simple answer that would satisfy him. But Jamie deserved truth, even when it was complicated. "A little bit. Not sad that he's gone, but sad that he existed at all. Does that make sense?" Jamie thought about this with the intensity he usually reserved for complex puzzles. "Like when I finish a puzzle but one piece is missing. I'm not sad about the missing piece. I'm sad that the puzzle was supposed to have it." "Exactly like that, little man. Exactly like that." At the school gate, Mrs. Henderson, Jamie's teaching assistant, waited with her warm smile. She'd been there since the beginning, helping Jamie navigate a world that often felt too loud, too bright, too much. "Good morning, Jamie. We're doing the solar system today." "Your favorite." Jamie's face lit up. "Did you know Jupiter has 79 moons? That's a prime number." As he disappeared into the school, Sophie watched until she couldn't see him anymore, a habit born from years of being his protector. Her phone buzzed with a text from her best friend Priya. "Cambridge acceptance celebration tonight? My treat." Life was moving forward, the way it always had, the way it always would. David's visit already felt like a dream, something that had happened to someone else, in another life. 3 months passed. Summer arrived in Manchester the way it always did, reluctantly, with intermittent sunshine that felt like a gift rather than a given. Sophie stood in her room, packing for Cambridge, each folded piece of clothing a step toward a future she'd built from necessity and determination. Jamie sat on her bed, organizing her pens by color, his way of helping. "You'll come back," he said, not a question but a statement of fact. "Always, little man. I'll always come back. Because we're a triangle, and triangles need all 3 sides or they collapse." Sophie pulled him close, memorizing the weight of him, the way he smelled like apple shampoo and possibility. "That's right. We're the strongest shape." Claire appeared in the doorway, holding an envelope. This came today, January 15th. David's letter. They'd forgotten, or perhaps deliberately ignored, that the date had passed. Claire held it out, unopened, letting Sophie decide. "Should we?" Sophie asked. "Together," Claire decided. They sat on Sophie's bed, Jamie between them, as Sophie opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a photograph. The letter was brief. "Building houses now. Honest work, 200 days sober, meetings every week. Learning to be someone worth knowing, even if no one ever knows me. The photo is from my group therapy. We built this community center for families affected by addiction. I put in a sensory room for children with special needs, named it Jamie's Space. No one knows why. That's okay. Being better doesn't need an audience. Thank you for the yellow, D." The photograph showed David in work clothes, paint splattered and tired but present, standing with a group of people in front of a modest building. He looked healthier, the grey Jamie had seen replaced with something warmer. "He's trying," Claire said softly. "Good for him," Sophie replied, and meant it. She handed the letter back to her mother. "File it away. Maybe Jamie will want it someday." What's Jamie's space?" Jamie asked, having read over their shoulders. "It's a room like your quiet corner at school, for children who need a calm place when the world gets too loud," Sophie explained. Jamie considered this. "That's good. All children should have quiet spaces. The sad man made something good." "Yes," Claire agreed. "He did. That evening, as the sun set over Manchester in a blaze of unusual glory, the Matthews family sat in their garden, Claire reading, Jamie building an elaborate marble run, Sophie reviewing her Cambridge materials. Mrs. O'Brien waved from over the fence. Mr. Patel stopped by with leftover samosas, and the evening filled with the gentle chaos of community. Sophie looked at her family, unconventional, imperfect, unbreakable, and thought about the message she'd given her father. It had been true, every word. They didn't need him, but more importantly, they didn't need to need him. They had become complete in themselves, a perfect triangle of love and support. "Sophie," Jamie asked, looking up from his marbles, "when you're a doctor, will you fix children like me?" "No, little man," Sophie said, pulling him close. "Children like you don't need fixing. They need understanding. That's what I'm going to do, help the world understand how perfectly you're made." Jamie smiled, the kind of rare, full smile that lit up his entire face. "Good, because I like being me." "So do we, sweetheart," Claire said, joining them on the grass. "So do we." As darkness fell over Willow Street, the Matthews family went inside, ready for dinner, homework, bath time, the beautiful, mundane rhythm of their lives. In the kitchen, stuck to the refrigerator with a dinosaur magnet, was a new drawing Jamie had made at school. 3 figures holding hands, a triangle of people, with the word family written in rainbow letters above them. Below it, in Jamie's careful handwriting, the strongest shape. And it was. Despite everything, because of everything, it absolutely was. The father had come back, but the daughter's message had been clear. They were already whole. The absence that had once threatened to break them had instead become the space where they learned to build something stronger. A family not defined by who was missing, but by who remained. In the end, Sophie's message wasn't about David at all. It was about them, about their triumph, about the beautiful truth that sometimes the best thing a person can do for you is leave, allowing you to discover just how magnificent you can become. As Sophie closed her bedroom door that night, Cambridge acceptance letter pinned to her wall like a promise, she whispered into the darkness, "Thank you for leaving, Dad. It taught us how to stay."